So would you welcome him again and thank him for coming, and we're going to videotape this. Yes,
Praise God. Well, great to be with you today, and thank you so much for your warm welcome. And take this mask and put it somewhere. How many are looking forward to the day we can put it somewhere for good? Well, we are getting there. Well, it's great to be with you, and I got my clicker here in my pocket as well, so we'll see if I can get this to communicate back there, but not sure if it's seems to be a connection issue on this cord here. I swear I didn't aim to break your microphone.
no, it gives you grief once in a while.
Okay, I better not move my right arm, and we'll be fine. So, there's a step there. I gotta watch that. I wander a little bit. So if there's actually an old story of a pastor who was told, if you ever forget what you're going to say, if you ever forget your line that you were going to say, just repeat what you last said, and it'll come back to you. And so he was preaching out of Revelation, and he said, "Behold, I come quickly." And he forgot immediately what he was going to say. So he thought, well, I better say it again. So he said, "Behold, I come quickly." He still didn't remember what he was going to say. Thought, this time I really got to give it. "Behold, I come quickly." And he steps forward, falls right off the stage, lands right in the lap of the lady in the front row, and he's apologizing and saying, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so embarrassed, I'm so sorry." She said, "It's my fault, Pastor, entirely my fault. You told me 3 times you were coming." So we will find out if I come quickly. As mentioned, I'm Paul Israelson, and my wife Tammy is here with us, and this is our family. We got 4 kids. Our oldest, let's see, I got a laser pointer, I think, on this thing. So that's Noah. He's in his 3rd year at Horizon College and Seminary, taking ministry studies there, looking toward ministry himself. Our second is Charis, and she is graduating high school this year, 17 going on 25, and really great kids that we have. We're quite very proud of them. Matthew is our 3rd, and Matthew is 16 now, turned 16 at the beginning of this year, finishing up grade 10. And Janae over here on the end is our youngest, and is just turning 14 here in a week. So a little over a week, 10 days. So they're doing very, very well despite all the challenges that we have. About 2017, I was elected as the assistant district superintendent. It was rather unexpected to have been elected in at that time. I wasn't really expecting it would happen. I don't know if you knew that, but I wasn't expecting it. It was sort of a surprise to me that I was elected in, and then I was within about 6 months of working with John Drisner as our superintendent. I said that John was saying he needed more help in the office. I said, "Well, John, I'm willing to come and work with you if you're interested." And he said, "That would be great." So we began to come up with a plan, and I was pastoring in Swift Current at the time, and I resigned at the church, but I stayed on part-time to help them in their transition, and I was part-time working in the district office once a week. And but I told John, I said, the only just before I resigned the church, I said, "The only way I'm going to do this, John, is if you are in for another term." Because I said, if you're not in for another term at our 2019 conference, I'm not sure if I want to, commit to working in the office, and then I don't know who my new boss is going to be. So he said, "Well, I'm 98% sure I'm going to let my name stand." So I resigned the church. I started working with him. That was in August of 2018. In January of 2019, John takes me for coffee just before he's about to get on a plane, and he says, "Hey, I'm 98% sure I'm not letting my name stand." And that put me into about 100% uncertainty. And he said, "So I don't know what the Lord's saying to you." I said, "I don't know either." So that led you ever have those moments in life where, the Bible talks about stepping out of the boat. You step out of the boat, you're walking on the water, everything's fine, you have a plan, you have a direction, but you don't realize the water moves. Currents pull you this way. The boat is pulled that way. And suddenly you turn around, move the right arm, sorry. Suddenly you turn around and the boat that you thought was supposed to be behind you isn't behind you anymore. Suddenly everything's shifted. Well, that was sort of how we felt. And then, lo and behold, I was nominated and elected as DS. So a very, to quote The Hobbit, a very unexpected journey. If you are at all Lord of the Rings, Hobbit fans, Tolkien fans, I don't know. If you're not, you absolutely despise him. I'm so sorry for making the comment. But a few things I just want to share with you. Just to note, you are part of a larger family. It is so important for us to remember this. Often we forget this. You are in the Saskatchewan district, which is one of 8 districts across Canada. You are part of 60 churches across our province. Currently, we have a number of churches in transition, meaning that they don't currently have a pastor. We have probably around close to 10 of them, around 10 of them. Some of them have been really long-term in transition. They have been pastorless for Wyson, I think it's over a decade, maybe 12, 15 years, somewhere in there. So they've just been led by lay leaders in their church and bring in special guest speakers and what have you. Others have entered into transition a little bit more recently, and so it's always a bit of a journey to seek ministry leaders to come in alongside us. Around 4,000 people would attend our churches weekly pre-COVID. And now amidst COVID and what have you, with many of our churches engaging online, with being restricted to currently 30 people in a gathering, the measurements are a lot harder to define. But it's interesting. As much as COVID has been a challenge, a difficulty, people that will not come through your physical door will watch through your digital window. And so we've had people that, I know in Rosetown there was a story of a family that were always inviting their friends, come to church, come to church, come to church. They said, no, it's not for us, not for us. We walk through the door, we're going to instantly combust, like those types of statements. And then a little while later, these friends said, is your pastor this fellow here, this so-and-so? And you have to know their pastor is a big guy with a mohawk. And is your pastor the big guy with the mohawk? And they're like, yeah? Oh, we watch him every week. My husband and I sit on the couch, we watch every week. We don't miss a Sunday. Isn't that interesting? So as much as it's been a challenge, it's also been a gateway. It's also been an opportunity for people to engage online. Our 2019 ACLR, we have an annual church life report. It is one of the most perhaps non-appreciated documents that a pastor can fill out. I'll just put it that way. Every year it comes around, ACLR time, oh joy, you've got to write down. And a lot of times if we've not been measuring well, we're guessing, how many people do you think we average on a Sunday? How many people do we, do we baptize? Oh, let me think here. How many people came to Christ this year? How much money did came into the church? What ministries are we offering? All these statistics begin to come through in this document. Well, of our churches in our district, I was doing some math the other day, which is not my forte. I'm just going to let you know. And according to our stats from 2018 into 2019, now you have to understand we only get these statistics about a year and a half after they were gathered, so they're nice and relevant. But the reality here is that in our district, we have the unfortunate reality of having 17 churches that would consider themselves plateaued, 18 of which would be declining, 15 would be growing and thriving, and I'm missing data from about 10 of them. And this lets us know something. We have work to do. We have a mission field. We have a job to do as believers in engaging our communities and sharing Christ with our neighbors and seeing people come to Christ. Why? Because this church was founded from a missional purpose. This community needed a gospel witness. This community needed a place and a people that would gather and be salt and light in the community to share Christ. And so, there we go. I'm going to back up here. I could almost launch into my message, but I realized I had one more slide for you. That is our new Horizon College building in Saskatoon in the northeast corner, where we are trying to raise young leaders to come and to pastor in our churches and our communities. And if you haven't come by it yet, please come and visit us. We're located in the northeast in Saskatoon, just off Attridge Drive, next to Forest Grove Community Church, MB Church there. We're literally right across the parking lot from them. And our district office is there as well. So let's dive into the message here today. As we talk about churches and about our direction, we talk about the mandate of the church. When I say the church, there's all kinds of descriptors that might come to mind for you. For many, it's the building. Well, is there a church in that community? And we think about the building. How many churches are there? Maybe we think of an organization. We think of different denominations. Well, there's Pentecostal churches, and there's Lutheran churches, and there's Catholic and Baptist and so forth. Maybe you think about different sizes. There's mega churches, and then there's small group gatherings that meet in homes. And everything in between. If you're thinking biblically, you would use biblical terminology. You think of the church, you think the bride of Christ, or the body of believers. Maybe you think about Sunday morning when I say church. Is it time for church? Well, let's go to church. It's Sunday. And we gather together, and we worship, and we preach, and we connect, and we pray. Church brings all kinds of different images to mind, different words to mind. And right now, of course, churches, it's different. COVID restrictions, having to wear masks, gathering limits. As I've stepped into this role, I don't know if I would have said yes to becoming district superintendent if I knew there was a global pandemic coming. Because truthfully, I have not found anything that has divided us more than COVID restrictions. It's not theology, it's health restrictions. Stop moving the right arm. Let me preach with my left. Church is different in a lot of ways. We have online gatherings. We have, versus in person. We have different methodologies that we can connect. The church has never been more global than it is right now. The fact that you can actually sit on your couch and tune into church from anywhere happening around the world. Our church in Swift Current, where I was pastoring, the pastor there, doing a great job, Ron Swanson, he would tell me that, he says, you know what's been interesting? We went online. I was already offering online, but they've upped it. They've really brought it to another level. And he says, I was getting messages from England, from people who were asking me how I can become a Christian. Global outreach. One of the challenges that we have in our current culture as well is that we are in a post-Christian culture. Meaning that, where the church was at one time in our country mainstream and was a influencer in our culture, people, especially younger generation people, do not esteem the church as once was. That in fact, the church has been marginalized in many ways. One of the things that we've been contending with our, I've been part of a multi-faith unit that has been trying to, committee that's been trying to gather with government leaders. We did finally have a meeting on Friday with Premier Moe and the health minister and mental health and addictions minister and a few other leaders from our government. We had been meeting fairly regularly with the business support team. That was all the connection that we were really offered. But we have more recently been able to have this meeting, and it was a good meeting, very respectful meeting. It was good to hear some of the perspectives and some of the challenges that our government faces. But one of the critiques that we've had as faith leaders is that we believe that places of worship are essential in our communities for the health and well-being of our people, not just of the people in these walls, but of our communities. And so we've been advocating for that. You know, recognize this, please. Recognize the contribution that we want to make. But we're in this post-Christian culture where, especially in Christendom, there's a marginalization. It's a challenge. How do we do church? How do we do outreach in a culture and a world that do not embrace it, and in fact resist it? One of the things I notice about churches that has also been changing is how, not just how we gather in one sense of you know, in being building-centric, but also being Sunday-centric. It used to be that church was the only show in town on a Sunday. Now, of course, we recognize that church gathers when they gather. They can gather at different times and in different places. So you might miss Sunday service, but you can watch it later online. Or maybe your church doesn't even gather on Sunday anymore. They gather on a Tuesday evening. Or you know, especially if they're a multi-site type of a ministry, they may have a centralized message that is utilized in many different contexts. But this can lead us to some challenges. One of the things as pastors that we contend with, that we love, that we appreciate, is gathering, because we love to see the people that we minister to. We love to look them in the eye, even though we can't tell at all what they're thinking. You're wearing the mask, and you're looking, and you're like, you know, I made a joke, but did anybody find it funny? Because nobody seems to be smiling. Of course, you know, it's just sort of awkward. It's sort of different. And one of the things about this, you know, COVID that has been a challenge for pastors is the inability also of seeing people present and gathered. You know, one of the ways that we struggle as leaders and ministers is that a lot of times we measure success in ministry by 3 B's. Budgets, how much money are we dealing with? You know, how successful is it? Buildings, how big and nice is the building? And butts, you know, the number of people that are in the seats. You know, we recognize that we're trained this way, we're oriented this way. And so suddenly everything's shifting and everything, and you start to wonder, am I being effective anymore? You know, especially when this has sort of been the metrics that we've been looking at. You know, our ACLR, as mentioned, it's all about these metrics. It's about, you know, budgets and buildings and butts. Can I say that from a pulpit? Is that okay? Sure. Okay. Somebody's going to write me a letter. I just know it. I'm going to get a letter. You said the B word. Okay. See, church, how we do church has had to shift. How we gather has had to shift. But one thing that doesn't shift is our mission. One thing that doesn't shift, no matter how we gather, no matter what church looks like, our mission stays the same. Church may look different, but our mission continues. A number of years ago, I was given a book. Pastor probably has the same book, because I think one of our superintendents gave it out years ago, called Jim and Casper Go to Church. I don't know if you remember that. So Jim and Casper, Jim's a former minister, now a book writer, an author, and what have you, and Casper is an atheist. And Jim used to actually hire people to come to church just to tell them what they experienced after the service. Because sometimes we just assume everybody knows everything. We just kind of have all inside jokes. We assume that we're friendly and so forth. So he had hired people to come in and just find out, are we actually friendly? Are we actually, very, very welcoming? How do people hear and receive and so forth? So very different take on that. But they would travel. They chose to go around, and he hired Casper, this atheist, to go with him to 12 different churches across the United States. Some of them mega churches like Willow Creek and Saddleback and Joel Osteen's church and Erwin McManus and so forth. They went to home churches, they went to small Presbyterian community churches, and they would sit there with their laptops and in the rows and sit there and type out their thoughts and their notes and so forth, and just taking it all in. And one time, just after they'd been to, I think at Saddleback at that point, and as they were walking into Saddleback, and it's a veritable mall, and everybody's got SUVs, and everything's just kind of what it is. Casper looks at Jim and says, "Jim, is this what Jesus asked you guys to do?" You see, Casper saw and experienced over and over again what Christians do when they do church. He saw it done with big budgets and no budgets, in large stadiums and in small buildings. The same format repeated itself regardless of the setting. The greet, sing, preach, collect, present form played out in front of us with unrelenting predictability. And when it was all done, he would turn to me and say, "Jim, is this what Jesus told you guys to do?" And he says this, he says, "Casper simply could not imagine Jesus telling his followers that the most important thing that they should do is to hold church services. If that's where they started, they would have concluded that Jesus' number one priority was that Christians invest the very best of their energy and their money into putting on a huge church service, a killer show if it were," said Casper. "Jim, is this what Jesus told you guys to do?" Now this is a really hard question for us, again, because we've been oriented toward a certain methodology. We're building-centric, we're Sunday-centric. We've enjoyed freedoms and benefits as churches. Our properties are property tax exempt, and we can do charity receipts and so forth for people that make donations. We've enjoyed certain aspects of privilege. But what if all those things were gone? Because they could be. We've wrestled with just simply the diminishing of gatherings, but what if the inability to gather presented itself altogether? Would the mission of the church continue? I'm not here to say prophetically this is going to happen in such and such a time, or this is going to be and look like this. I don't exactly know. I don't know if anything will ever change in our lifetime, that maybe we will continue to gather as we've always gathered and so forth. But I would hope, one of the things that our General Superintendent, David Wells, so he's my pastor, so our General Superintendent, David Wells, has said, if all we're concerned about is getting back to normal, he says, normal has been that 75% of our churches nationwide have been plateaued or in decline. I don't want to go back to normal. If it's simply about us getting back to gathering as we've normally gathered, but not impacting our communities, not becoming missionally available, not engaging the needs of our people, not being the church, I don't want to get back to normal.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. Yeah, absolutely, he's right.
Normal isn't good enough. See, if we exist just so we can have the biggest building or the best show, the best thriving budget, then our mission is too shallow, friends. It's far too shallow. I think COVID has highlighted this fact that things can go in an instant, that everything can be shifted and changed, but the mission of the church cannot change. In the book of Acts, we find a number of stories of this early thing we call the church. The followers of Jesus, now empowered by the Holy Spirit, have started a building program and fundraising, and they petitioned the government for tax-free land status and a registered charity number. No, it isn't what happened at all, is it? They gathered together, and they were all about sharing the good news of Jesus. That was their one big thing. That was the only thing that they cared about. That was the thing that mattered most, was sharing the good news of Christ. They took the last commandment of Jesus very seriously, and that was Matthew chapter 28. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me, therefore go and make disciples of all nations. We know this passage, don't we? We've read it time and time again. But this is the one big thing that was given to the church. This was the only thing. This was the thing that they were to be about. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. In fact, Jesus takes it to another level later on where he says in Acts 1:8, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. We love this as Pentecostals, don't we? Woo! Yeah, we love that. You'll receive power and you'll be able to what? What is the purpose of the power of the Holy Spirit? Well, he says, to be my witnesses. To be my witnesses. This is the purpose of Spirit baptism, is a Spirit empowerment for witness. This is what the one big thing that Jesus calls us to be about. Jesus' ministry was all about lost people. He called fishermen to come and be fishers of men. Or if you read, as we read a little bit out of Isaiah this morning in our communion, but Jesus says, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me, right? He goes to that passage in Isaiah 60, 61, I think, somewhere in there, and he says, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to build a building. Gather on a Sunday. No, he's called me to go and meet broken people and to share the love of God with lonely, hurting people, traveling throughout the regions to connect with the down and outs. I was reading in my devotions last night. I read through the Bible in a year program, and I happened to find myself reading about Zacchaeus up in the tree. And what does Jesus do? He says, Zacchaeus, come on down, because we're not going to a gathering somewhere. I'm going to your house. I'm going to your house. Jesus sitting there with Zacchaeus' buddies, and what is the complaint? You're hanging out with the wrong crowd here. Jesus says, I did not come for the polished and the what have you. I came for broken, hurting people. So Jesus modeled it, and he commands his disciples to do the same. And my concern for the church today, as a superintendent, and looking across our province and looking at these statistics and looking at the challenges that we face, is that so often, and we're all part of this deal where we're online and people are fighting. As mentioned, I was on the call with Scott Moe, and he says, I've got a stack of letters on my desk that I read right through, and he says, a bunch of them will tell me, you need to open up everything, and the other stack will tell me, you need to close everything. And he's like, this is the reality. And a lot of times as Christians, we can get more concerned about our rights and our freedoms and the external markers of successful ministry and be less concerned about the mission of Jesus. See, the mission of Jesus is not about buildings, and it's not about politics. It's about people. Is this what Jesus asked you guys to do? And so we look at Acts, and I'm just going to breeze through a few things here. You're very welcome to hop and skip through Acts, but I'm going to be going very, very quickly to just simply say, as we look through the book of Acts in the first 7, 8, 9 chapters and so forth, we find some amazing things. Acts chapter 2, they're baptized in the Spirit. They start getting saved. And Acts 3, a beggar is healed. And Peter preaches, and people are responding, and the church is growing, and there's revival, and everybody's celebrating. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. But it's interesting to note that as much as this church that has been founded by Jesus and filled with the power of God, and everything seems to be going wonderful, guess what? Problems come. Problems come. There's problems that come from without, and there's problems that arise from within. Problems from without, some external issues that arise, and also some internal issues. So we find Acts chapter 4, Peter and John, after this wonderful moment of healing and people, receiving Christ and so forth, they're put into prison. They're put into prison and interrogated. Of course, they're released and so forth. They're threatened and told not to preach anymore in this name. And what do? They they begin to pray, and they begin to say, God, give us more boldness. Give us more boldness. Acts chapter 5, it's not an external issue, it's an internal one. Ananias and Sapphira's greed and deception in the church begin to threaten and bring deceit into the church. More external pressure, persecution and imprisonment and beatings happen in Acts 5. In Acts chapter 6, there's conflict about a widow feeding program. We're not feeding the widows, the ones that should be fed. And these conflicts is back and forth, external and internal and external. And finally, Stephen is stoned and the church is scattered. Persecution rises against the church in a great way, and the church begins to be scattered. Troubles come externally and internally. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're ever looking for a problem-free church, you're going to have to keep shopping, right, Pastor? Problems come. There's always threats against the church throughout history, persecution and martyrdom and opposition and hatred. Jesus even promised us this. He goes, guess what? They hated me, they're going to hate you. And we all said, yeah, I want to be a part of that. But this is the reality. There's internal threats. There's corruption and greed. Pastor and I were talking today about some of the failures that have happened in the church throughout history. Difficult, dark, disturbing things. Ethical and moral failings. One of the uncomfortable things I have to deal with as a superintendent is that if there is a situation in a credential holder that is requiring an investigation, guess who gets the job? It's not an easy task. These things happen, external and internal. So what do we do? What do we do with all this? What do we do with all these things that play against the church and the mission of the church? Well, I want to encourage you in this one word. The answer to this is in the word alignment. See, in handling the external and the internal conflicts facing the church, we need to be all about alignment. I don't know if any of you have enjoyed the pleasures, and I'm being a little facetious as I say this, of driving in Saskatchewan in the midst of a big storm. We all have. Right? I grew up in Alberta, but I moved to Saskatchewan, and then we ended up being in the south. I went to Moose Jaw. I took a worship ministries program at Briarcrest. I landed in Regina, and then we moved to Swift Current. And I can tell you, the south really enjoys its wind. We experience a lot of wind down there, and there's times, of course, we know whether we've experienced it ourselves or heard stories from others or seen it on the news, sometimes the wind can be so bad it can take your vehicle right off the road. There's external pressures that come against your vehicle. And if you're facing that wind, and you ever have those moments where you're driving along and you've got the wheel turned like 15 degrees over just to keep yourself going on the road, and then you hit a bank of trees that block the wind. Ooh. Exactly. That's a wind. You ever heard the wind like that? Thanks for the sound effects team out there. Okay. What about when it's internal? You're driving along and you have a tire blowout. Or your wheel needs alignment. And you ever driven a vehicle that you always just have to hold the steering wheel crooked? I remember one time I took my car in for an alignment, and the guy said, oh, in order for us to align that, we're going to actually have to turn your steering wheel clean upside down. I said, what? That makes no sense. I took it to another guy and he fixed it. But, you know, we understand that there are times when external forces play against your vehicle and internal realities play against your vehicle. And in both cases, we have to fight and work and strive to stay aligned to where we're going. Alignment matters. In the church, it means having a clear sense of missional direction and purpose in front of you that you continue to work toward, you continue to course correct for. No matter how much the wind buffets you, no matter how much COVID plays against you, no matter how much internal conflicts rage against you, that we continue to move forward with the mission of Jesus. See, alignment today, in a Christian COVID world means that we don't get encumbered and distracted with all that we've lost. We pivot. We adjust to determine how we can continue with the mission that Jesus has given us. It means adjustment. It means saying, okay, this is the reality that we're contending with, but how are we going to continue the mission of Jesus? If we're more concerned about how this impacts how we might like things, that's not a good enough reason. That's not a good enough reason. We need to be about the mission of Jesus. I think that this plays out in so many levels, not just about the external stuff, but the internal stuff. Sometimes one of the biggest enemies of good in a church, or of great in a church, are good things. Sometimes we run programs and activities that we just always run, but we don't really take time to look and reflect and say, is this helping us accomplish the one big thing? Is running this, is this helping us go, make followers of Jesus? Is this helping us grow the church? Is this helping us see people in our community that aren't currently here yet want to be a part of this body? I simply throw that out there as simply something that we always have to do. As a district, I've come into the district office, and what was really interesting about when I got elected in as superintendent is that of the other 10 or so elected, well, not even elected, let's see, what, another 8 elected members, or 7 elected members, plus 3 appointed members that we add to our team. Of the 10, 11 people that we add to our entirety of our district executive, nobody out of that whole group was an incumbent to their role. Everybody was new. So we're just figuring it all out at this point. But in those moments of newness, in that moment of where everything's shifted a little bit, comes great opportunity to say, okay, what is the district to be about? What is the role of the district office? And we believe, and I believe, that the role of the district office is to enable and help and support our churches to accomplish the one big thing Jesus gave them. So how are we doing that? So then we have to say, what are we doing to help our churches to achieve the one big thing? So one of the things that we've done is we hired a fellow by the name of Louis Halpgewachs to be a church coach, to walk with not just our pastors, but our church leadership teams, to be able to ask really hard and good questions and to go through evaluative processes to say, how are we doing? What are the things that we need to do in order to pivot and to adjust in our current day in order to still be about the mission? Those processes can sometimes be disruptive because one of the things about becoming a purpose-driven church is that you have to recognize where in places you've also been a preference-driven church. Those aren't often easy because, well, if we're going to achieve a purpose here, then maybe we need to change this. And everyone says, wait, you want to change that? Okay, you do realize that was started by that person, right? And that's going to, that can cause some issues. But it becomes less of an issue if we say, if it helps us accomplish our mission, we're all for it. If it helps us reach people, we want to be about it.
That's the way it should be.
We need to ask these questions. We need to be evaluative. And so back to Acts chapter 7 ends with great persecution coming across against the church. So what do they do? What do? They scatter, right? They go into hiding and they never raise their head again. No, they did scatter, but the mission stayed the same. What did we find out? In Acts chapter 8, verse 4, it says, those who've been scattered preached the word wherever they went. Acts chapter 15, those who have been scattered by the persecution that broke out when Stephen was killed traveled as far as Phoenicia and Cyprus, Antioch, spreading the word only among the Jews, but some of them however, men from Cyprus and Cyrene went to Antioch and began to speak to Greeks also, telling them about the good news of Jesus, and the Lord's hand was upon them. And a great number of people believed and turned to the Lord. They pivoted, they shifted, they changed, they reoriented. They said, hey, we can't gather in Jerusalem as we might like to do, but this persecution has a benefit. It's going to push us out. I'm so sorry. It's going to push us out. It's going to engage with the mission. I'm going to take up an offering later for a new mic cable. In Acts chapter 15, when internal conflicts arose again, some felt that Gentile believers should have to follow the law as we're following the law, right? We've got to keep this rule book the way that we want to keep the rule book and so forth. And it was determined. They gathered, believers, the leaders gathered together, and they said this. It says, and James said, it's my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. We think it's wise, though, for you guys to avoid these things. These things would be good for you guys to consider. They wanted the mission to keep going. Church, I want to encourage you in this season, in all the external winds that we're facing, with all the internal realities that we contend with, let's be about the one big thing. Let's be aligned to that purpose. I can tell you that I can't promise that a church that is always aligned to the mission won't have conflict in it. But it becomes a measuring point. It becomes this line that we keep coming back to say, okay, I hear what you're saying over this and you're concerned about this, but you see, this is why we're making the adjustment. We want to be about this. It helps clarify the conversations. It helps adjust the narrative. In John chapter 4, the Lord gave me John chapter 4 very early on in Swift Current. I was pastoring there, stepped into the role, and the Lord brought to mind John chapter 4 when Jesus meets the Samaritan woman at the well, and they have this wonderful conversation, and she's blown away, and wow, I met the Messiah, and she goes back to town, right? I just totally skipped over a massive part of the narrative. You can read on your own. And as she's going back, she passes by the disciples returning from their grocery shopping trip, because they went into town to buy food. And they come back, and of course they're kind of seeing this woman that obviously had been in a conversation with their rabbi, raised eyebrows all around. Jesus, don't you know who you're talking to? Jesus, you're talking to a Samaritan woman. And by the look of her, a Samaritan woman with a history. I mean, but nobody wanted to say anything, right? They're coming back, and what's their response in this? They're saying, well, Jesus, here's your Big Mac. And Jesus says, my food is to do the will of the one who sent me. And they're like, did somebody bring him food? Where was he like stashing away some nuts in the pocket of his robe or something? Like, what's going on here? Jesus says, look up, the fields are white into the harvest. Right? We know this story. I simply want to make this point. The disciples were coming back with a mentality of looking in to their own needs. Feed yourself. Feed yourself, Jesus. Take care of yourself. Feed yourself. They were looking down on the woman that they just walked past. They were looking in to themselves, and they were looking down on others, and Jesus challenges them to look up and out. Lift your eyes. Look up. Fields are white into the harvest. Church, I want all of our churches across our province to be purpose-driven churches. To be about the purpose, aligned to the purpose, the missional purpose of Jesus. And for us to step into that and walk with that is going to mean at times letting go of some of the in things that we like, some of the preferences that we lean toward and we prefer. But if it helps us accomplish the mission, why not? Because I don't want to see more of our churches fall into the plateaued or decline. don't want to see many of our churches in that 75% nationwide. And in the PAOC, and brothers and sisters, we are the largest evangelical denomination in Canada. And we're 75% nationwide, plateaued or declined. We need to change. We need to pivot. We need to align.